That was exciting. So, at this point, are there any comments from the public of any matters that are not on tonight's agenda? Hearing none, can I have a motion to adopt tonight's agenda?
So moved.
In a second.
Second.
All in favor? Okay, and that brings us to consent. Can I have a motion to adopt our consent agenda for personnel, special services, and business?
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
All in favor? Okay. Congratulations, Kristen. And welcome to Byram Hills. Have a good day. So now at this time, please feel free to not stay, but you're more than welcome to stay, but we will not hold it against you if you choose not to.
Internal audit report.
Exciting stuff.
I'm going to drag you out with me.
Nice to see you. Bye, Gina. Bye, Chris. Okay. And that brings us to our new business, and that's acceptance of the internal audit report. And I need to get this approved, right? Okay. Can I have a motion to accept our internal audit report for 2015, 2016?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Okay, and I'm going to invite Ray Wager to come up and talk about our report.
All right, thank you very much. Good evening again. We'll keep the good news going tonight. Your internal audit report has been completed. It's a state requirement. If you're over 1,500 students, you have to have an internal audit every year. And what we do is we come in, we interview people, we do a risk assessment, we go through your procedures, your controls, your checks and balances, and make sure that they're all set up and designed and working properly. We issue a report. The report is two parts. It has a risk assessment which shows some follow-up from last year's suggestions, and there's some improvements in your controls and procedures. There's 4 or 5 other items in that report that we think, that we suggest that you may be able to do even a better job on your controls and procedures. We've classified all those items as a low risk. We don't see anything in your procedures which we would consider a high risk. So that's all very positive. We also have performed some testing every year. Besides a risk assessment, we're supposed to do testing of certain areas to make sure that your controls procedures not only are in place but are functioning properly. So we looked at 2 different areas. We looked at your healthcare compliance with the new healthcare law, and it looks like you did a very good job in adjusting to all the new requirements for 2015, which is not an easy task at all. So hopefully that will continue. I think things are getting even a little bit tougher as we go forward with the compliance issues, but right now you're really in very good shape there. The other area which we looked at was in your reserve funds. All schools have different reserve funds at different funding levels, and we were asked to take a look at that to see if there's any suggestions that we could come up with, and we did. We have some suggestions to maybe expand some of the definitions and explanation of the different reserve funds you have and the goals for the different funding levels. We think would be a good idea, and I think that would enhance your accountability and transparency in that area, which all schools need part of their financing to maintain programs and take care of things that you cannot anticipate. You need reserve funds, you need long-range planning, and that's all part of it. So you have a very, very solid financial position, and going forward you should be in very good shape. You should be able to continue where you're at financially.
So the reserve funds.
Yes.
For expanding the definitions, and your suggestion was in board policy.
Mm-hmm.
That's where it should go, right?
I think so, and then review it every year to determine if there's any changes in the different funding levels or the purpose. Some of the reserve funds you can have multiple purposes to them. Capital reserves could be for any variety of things. So every year it probably does need to be looked at and potentially changed or enhanced. In the insurance area, if you decide that you may want to self-fund for some insurance versus have it covered by policy, that could change your desires for the balances that you keep in reserve funds. So I think once a year is a good time to just take a look and see if there is any changes you want to make.
So policy committee for next year, I guess, put that in and review it. John? Took a note.
Any questions and comments?
You receive full cooperation all the way through your work?
You know, and that's something that I usually mention when I come down here, is that we work with about 70 school districts in the state. And the cooperation and the availability of your people that is probably better than any school that we work with. They're very cooperative and very open as far as discussion. We interview people. We interviewed 14 people this time during our process, and the whole atmosphere is very positive.
Right.
Very positive. It's a lot like tonight. I mean, it's very positive. We go around and whoever we talk to. And that's not always the case in some of the schools we go to.
And Ray, I know you keep your ear to the ground on developments in Albany and trends and things like that, and things to look for. And you know, I for one look forward to your recommendations for what to look at next year's cycle. And you know, I think the district has really benefited from your reports over the years.
You know, thank you for that, and that's what we try to do, is to focus on different areas that we might come up with suggestions and for improvements and better controls and procedures. I'm thinking going forward, what might be a good idea is that I could supply you with a list of all the different areas that we've done and the timing of the different areas of purchasing and the transportation and, you know, those different areas. We looked at computer controls. Probably I can send out, if you don't have it, Greg, I can send out the list of the timing, which areas we've done and when we did them. And then from that list, we could probably maybe develop something new and different. But the Affordable Care Act, obviously, I think was a good area to take a look at. And even in the next couple of years, it wouldn't be bad to relook at that because of some enhanced requirements coming forward in the next 2 or 3 years. That would not be a bad idea to take another look at it.
As long as you come here with this kind of news, you're always welcome.
Yeah. What is the time frame again? When was it where we picked what you were going to study? Was it back in September?
The fall.
I think it was the fall.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right, and I share with the board a list of everything you've done over the years.
Yes.
To kind of prompt some thinking.
Yep, I think that's a great idea. Very good idea. Good. Okay.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you.
for coming.
My pleasure. Thank you all very much.
Appreciate that.
Someday we'll give you an award.
Just something.
A longevity award.
Oh, we didn't vote.
We have a motion on the
Thank you.
table and we got the report.
You're absolutely right.
so
Thank
we
you
need
for
to-
the reminder. Okay, so all in favor of the motion? Thank you. Okay, thank you for that. And that brings us to Mr. Castagna, who's been very patient. A report on our interscholastic athletics for the end of the year. Does it feel like you've only been here a year?
No,
5 years?
a couple. Just a couple. Well, thank you for allowing me to present the report on interscholastic athletics this evening. I have a slide presentation that I will work from, that I will speak to, and I will speak to you and use that as my notes. When I first was appointed to this position last spring, I went out and obviously I had something made up that I believe the 10 most important words that are the part of my philosophy and what I believe I bring with me or have brought with me to Byram Hills. I had these pencils made up and I had... Bribing school board members?
That's right.
What's that? Bribery?
Oh,
No. I had these pencils made up that I've given out as part of my entry plan to everybody that I've met with, all the coaches and the teachers and other community members and as such. And I believe that this here is the foundation of our work, and this sets the tone for all that we do in athletics and beyond. With character development, if we can do this on a regular basis, if we can have the students and the student athletes saying to each other, I can help you, how can I help you, and having the student athletes hear this from coaches and hear this, speak to each other this way on a regular basis, wow, then everything else will just fall into place. And I firmly believe that. Professional development for coaches. Many of our coaches attend local and regional conferences to help them in their area of expertise. And I believe in finding conferences that are appropriate in certain situations for coaches to attend. I hold 2 seasonal meetings each season. I meet with the coaches. We get together and we share ideas, we share feedback, and we share concerns. And collectively, I believe that brings the staff closer together when they can share ideas and concerns with each other to help us troubleshoot together and stay ahead of problems and to make us, to help us grow. Books and journals, every year I give out 2 books to the staff. This year I selected, both the books actually were by John Gordon. The first was The Energy Bus, and the second was Hard Hat. And Energy Bus is about a book about overcoming adversity and maintaining your energy level through adverse times. And the second, Hard Hat, is a book. It's a book that gives coaches tools on how to build a team, how to have athletes become better teammates. And it's a great tool for bringing a group together to focus on one common goal. And the mentor program, we're very fortunate to have a mentor program here in Byram Hills, where the new coaches have a direct link, a direct line to a veteran coach on a daily basis that helps with decision making and helps with the delivery of instruction. And I believe our students are the direct beneficiaries of that mentor program and our professional development program. Community service. As you can see, the majority of our teams participate in some form of community service, and many raising awareness or raising money for the fight against cancer or other meaningful, needy organizations that we can help and provide help to them. And our athletes also provide hope to young children who are in hospitals and visiting them and bringing a smile to their faces and demonstrating caring by visiting the elderly in the local nursing homes. And I believe teaching selflessness and modeling that, I believe it empowers and the athletes and the student athletes and teaches altruism that will stay with them for a lifetime. And collectively, this school year, they've raised over $90,000 for organizations to help others. And I believe that this slide and the slides prior to this slide set the foundation for the slides that I will show you next that talk to our success and our accomplishments. First, we should be proud of the number of teams that we offer, and the male and female sports, and the total number of sports collectively here for the boys and for the girls. The numbers here for the high school participation in the fall and the spring, our busiest seasons, it's about a 40% participation rate in those 2 seasons. And at the middle school, it's about a 30% participation rate in the fall and the spring. And accomplishments, there were quite a few accomplishments, many to be proud of, and this was definitely an exciting school year. With our league championships and section championships, we had 111 all-league athletes. That's quite impressive, and 12 all-section athletes. And the numbers there, you can see the rest of the numbers there. But to achieve success in our league, we're in a very competitive league, very competitive within our conference alignment, and we'll be there for the next 2 years. And to achieve this, it is, as I mentioned, is quite an accomplishment. But to do this at the section level and the state level, but at the national level, and this past weekend we had members from our varsity track team compete down in Greensboro, North Carolina as part of the short sprint medley relay. And they came in 25th out of 79 teams that competed down there. It's an exciting race, an exciting time, and they made a quick visit down to North Carolina for an experience they'll never forget. I saw some of the pictures, and it really, I just saw them today, this afternoon, and it really was special. But this team, the girls on the track team, this year they set 13 school records. That is impressive. As I had mentioned earlier in a different presentation, the day some of the records were falling, the students were knocking on the door. They wanted me to let them into the gym so they can take a picture of their record. So it's the last time it'll be on
before you dig it down.
So that was a lot of fun, watching the kids come in when the words started getting out. They were texting each other that their records were going down. But quite an accomplishment here for this season and for this spring as well, mentioning that. School recognition, I believe that hard work pays off. And we work very hard on sportsmanship. And I'm proud of that the coaches embrace that, the spectators, the parents, and our community embraces sportsmanship. From the second you drive down the driveway, there's the sign there, what sportsmanship means and what good sportsmanship is and how it's valued. And I must say that today, I'm extremely proud. Today, I received a telephone call from the executive director of the New York State Public High School Athletic Association. That Byram Hills High School is one of 3 high schools in New York State that will be recognized as a top sportsmanship school in New York State. And on July 26th, I will travel to a ceremony to officially receive the banner that will be hung in the high school gym. We'll hang it in the gym.
That's fantastic. What's the criteria for that?
The criteria is first, the school fills out an application, and how many teams do you have, and your venues, and do you send support home and away to the venues, and also, once all the criteria is in, then there's a committee that votes and looks over your material and kind of validates it that we represent ourselves well, both home and away. And so it's quite an honor. One of 3 schools in New York State. I'm really excited about this. With this, some more recognition from the state, the New York State Scholar Athlete Team Award. We had 20 varsity teams this year achieve this recognition, and really what that is, it's for those of you not familiar with the Scholar Athlete Team, select a certain number of teams designated by the state for each sport. On that team must have a 90 GPA or higher. And when we apply for that, and then the state will let us know if we've achieved it, and to have 20 in one school year is impressive. We had 2 Con Ed award winners, the prestigious Con Ed award that's given out in June. The dinner is in June, sorry, but the awards are given out weekly to Westchester County athletes. We had 1 Golden Dozen Award winner for football, that's Scholar Athlete Award for a football player, and Diamond 9 is a similar type award for a baseball player. Challenges, okay. I believe that every organization has challenges. I oversee and watch over 106 coaching positions, and I believe the most important thing that we do is it's who we hire and who we empower to work with our students and our student athletes. And this year alone, we hired 37 new coaches to join our staff. And as you may know, there's a lot of demands on time and time commitment to be a coach, especially at the varsity level. There is a high demand there, and it's working with the coaches to make them feel valued so that they will stay on the staff. New York State certification requirements are part of that commitment that the coaches make, and sorting through the applicants down below there, it says the right fit, and really making sure and spending the time that the athletes, that the coaches are the right fit for our student athletes
So
and
those
for our
coaches,
school.
those new coaches are not, they're not working for the district at this point, right? They're outside the district, they're not teachers.
The
They're not-
37 new positions,
They're not
they
teachers
were
in the
filled.
district.
They were filled this year. 37 new positions.
Oh,
So some of them are teachers, but
They are,
maybe they
okay.
haven't coached before.
Okay.
But we filled 37 positions that had vacancies
And one or more of
this
them
year.
are coaches that have coached here before coming back.
What's that? I'm sorry?
One or more of them are coaches that have coached here and are coming back to coach.
And yes,
Yeah.
and hopefully that continues.
Great.
My vision is to continue to align the varsity, junior varsity, and modified programs from a sense of the varsity coaches, supporting the varsity coach in aligning with the other coaches in that particular sport with terminology and certain skills and techniques. And I mentioned terminology and just an attitude, a work ethic, and that will help make the transition smoother for the middle school athletes coming to the high school. So I think that's important, to get the coaches together on a regular basis from that particular sport so that they can share, once again, thoughts, ideas, and concerns about that particular sport. And once again, always trying to retain quality coaches through professional development and through feedback at the right time, feedback that's appropriate and that is meaningful to them so that they feel valued in our organization. And to continue to embrace community service and to continue to work at that, because I believe it is important to what we do. And whenever you can help somebody else reach their goal, you get closer to your goal. And facility management is extremely important, and I plan on continue to work with our Director of Facilities, Steve Thompson, to maintain our facilities and make improvements where needed on a timely basis within the budget, so that we can maintain our grounds, and if improvements are needed, we can stay on top of them. I went through my presentation. I hope I didn't go through that too quickly, but at this time I'd like to leave, if there are any questions, I'd ask if there are any questions.
I have one comment, one question. So
Sure.
on the comment side, so first of all, for the fact that you've been only here for a year, you made a really big mark, I think, in the community and in the program, and so
Thank
I
you.
commend you for that. The emphasis on professionalism, sportsmanship, and scholar athletics, I think, is so important. I don't have any direct experience with the high school teams or even the modified teams, given that my kids are young. But I have now had experience in sort of the travel circuit in middle school, and some of the coaches out there that we played in other communities are not good role models for kids. I mean, they're just not. And so I think that you continuing to emphasize, picking coaches wisely that are going to be good role models and have the values that we want our kids to have is great. On the question side, I guess with the mix of sports that we have and the three aspects of the program, the modified, JV, and varsity, I guess any thoughts after you've been here a year in terms of whether do we have too many sports, too few sports, do we have the right sports? Like, is the program, will you envision over the next couple of years do you think you'll make changes, or do you think that we have the right mix?
Well, I think through my thoughts and my vision of bringing the coaches together and having them align and share their philosophy and their thoughts, I think that will determine the direction of the program. It will help us see if that program is in the right direction. If we have a varsity coach in place that really knows the sport and really knows what the sport needs and the requirements for that sport, and speaking with the modified coaches, and we're all on the same page, and I think that speaks to it, and then communicating to the parents and to the athletes about what we offer. And I think to answer your question about having too many sports, I think I need to be in it a little bit longer to really assess and see how the numbers fall out for a short period of time moving forward. But that is a valid question. It's a great question. And
Too many,
we have
too few of the right ones, yeah.
You may have a pop quiz on the books you've recommended that they
Okay.
read too. You know, it's one thing to promote that, and I laud that. I think it's terrific. But you know, at these coaches meetings, oftentimes so much focuses on that. You know, shared vocabulary for techniques, and are you coaching the little ones and, you know, grooming them because, you know, I would love a huge stable of, you know, talented athletes every year kind of thing. And you sort of miss the emphasis on the character development piece of it. It gets lost pretty easily, but I think it's fantastic that you emphasize that right up front.
Thanks. It's so easy to miss, and if you don't address it, it makes it even easier. And I firmly believe that we have to be the role models, and I'm constantly advocating that we are the role models. We have to, the athletes have to, they should be watching how we address an official. That's where it starts.
Right.
It starts right there.
Absolutely.
Right there is when it starts.
And the parents do the same thing.
Yeah. So it's how we address out in public. We're modeling. We're modeling all the time.
So it does sound like there's a concerted effort then to kind of bring the middle school sports and the kids more into the high school. Is that right? Because I kind of witnessed that in soccer a little bit, where they're having you had the kids come, the 8th grade kids, come to the high school pre-sport meeting and stuff, right? So there is sort of more of a push, which I find actually fascinating and interesting and exciting.
Yeah, so I'd like to just expand on that.
Yeah.
And the main reason for inviting the middle school student athletes and the parents to the high school meeting is so that they can hear the message and they can see what is formulated. They can see it, they can feel it, they can hear it, and it gives them a sense of a vision. What am I working for? Is this the right sport for me? You know, to answer your question. So it's part of that. And that I believe it builds. It builds a sense of pride within a program when you have all of the coaches together talking about the same things, and when it's all positive, it can grow in a great way.
And I wonder too if that will have an impact on the numbers for modified, because that's always an issue too, dwindling numbers for modified sports, especially as our enrollment starts to lag when those grades come up into the middle school.
Yeah, that's why I think it's important to start now to let the middle school athletes know what we have available at the high school.
Great.
Yeah, I have many commendations for Rob. We've had a chance to work closely this year on some general philosophical things that were great to talk about, and some challenges and issues that were challenging. I think one of the toughest thing about his job is that everybody thinks they know everything about sports, so virtually everybody you talk to, I'm sure, can tell you a better way to do what you're doing. But when we were first looking to replace Mike, the values is one of the big things. And you led tonight with 2 things that I want to commend you for. You know, you've communicated to your athletes that there's a value in doing service to other, and gotten 31 of 38 teams to do activities together. You know, that certainly relates to what we were thinking about. And of course, our congratulations to you. But your excitement alone, when you called me today to tell me about the Sportsmanship Award, was indicative that the values are where we want. One of the most striking things in here, I heard some, maybe not quite gasps, but deep breaths, when you pointed out that you supervise 106 coaches. Think about that, the vast majority of whom are part-time. They're not even here during the day if you want to try and talk to them. And that you replaced 1/3 of them. So one thing that I can say kind of publicly now is Jen and I concluded negotiations with the Byram Hills Teachers Association, because one of the things we hope to do with this new budget was to change the model that you have for an assistant athletic director. That will get you more help. So that was successfully negotiated, and I'll be presenting that to the board at the next meeting. And I think we would like to help you with 106 coaches. And that's not even your whole job. I mean, you've also got 20-some PE teachers who you supervise. It's quite a load.
It's a little bit more to do.
Yeah.
Thank you, and I do want to be clear that the 106 coaches does include assistant athletic directors. It includes them as part of the team.
Thank you, Rob.
Any other questions? Thank you so much for coming and presenting
Thanks
your
for the
kids
pencil.
with us. And
Thank you.
yes,
I feel like Johnny Carson.
I didn't see any state champions this year. You know, you said one thing, Rob, which was, the important thing is, you know, who you get to run the teams, i.e. the coaches. Well, for us, it's who we were going to get to succeed Michaelino. And just as you feel that you've chosen well, we feel we've chosen very well. So we look forward to our continuing partnership, and we're thrilled you're here, Rob.
Thank you. Thank you.
very nice.
Thanks.
Thanks, Rob. All right.
So, Rob, you can step up.
Oh, yeah, you.
Okay. Thank you.
You should.
I'm like,
You should.
talking about APPR right now. Thank you. Good night, thank you so
Thank
much. Okay, and that brings us then to 10.3, which is acceptance of guide to teacher evaluation, APPR, and I do need a motion to accept that. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
And the second.
Second.
Thank you. And Tim, you're
Didn't we
going.
just do this?
Yeah, it's Groundhog Day for APPR.
Sure, I will give you an update on our APPR. There is our guide to teacher evaluation is in your packet. It's only 63 pages, 53% shorter than our previous APPR under 3012C. So we are now transitioning from 3012C to 3012D. I could not fit it all on a pencil, so I reduced it to 11 slides. So I think that will suffice. So we'll try to summarize this in a quick way. There are two categories in the new 3012D regulations, the observation category and student performance category. It's one less than 3012C, which included a local student performance option or section. So it's now based on a matrix system. Used to be an accumulation of points up to 100. But instead, these two categories will be evaluated separately, and then you look for the intersection. So every teacher will be evaluated on classroom observations and be rated between highly effective, effective, developing, and ineffective. And then they will also be rated on student performance in those four categories. The overall teacher rating is based on the intersection of those two. So this is a new matrix model that the state is introducing. This will go into effect on July 1st when state approves it with your acceptance of it.
And this was the same base matrix that they had in the legislation, right? That
Yes,
hasn't
it's the same
changed.
thing.
Because
So
this
this
legislation still
regulation is
exists.
based on the legislation. It does. So let me explain the observation category, some details about that, and I'll point out some new pieces to it. So every teacher will have what's called a lead evaluator assigned to them, and the lead evaluator will be the teacher's principal, assistant principals, and their direct supervisor, the chair or director. And all of those three can do observations, and at the end of the year, those observations are all rated and weighted 85% of the teacher's overall observation. And the new element to teacher evaluation under 3012D is the introduction of an independent evaluator. The independent evaluator is defined in the regulations as not having the same VEDS code, which means that the evaluator can't be in the same building as the teacher they're observing. They have to be from another building. Or they could be outside people, outside the district. So the governor had an idea at one point of having outside evaluators be college professors, for example, that we could hire to bring in. We chose in our local negotiations that the independent evaluator would have to be a Byram Hills administrator. We just then will have to assign them, and the superintendent will make that assignment at the beginning of each school year to make sure that every teacher has someone who's not in their building. So for example, if I'm a middle school math teacher, I will have my lead evaluator be Dr. Powderly, be Lisa Pellegrino, it could also be Kim Lappel, who will decide on who does the observations. And then someone else will be assigned by the superintendent. Say we assign Chris Walsh to be the independent evaluator, and he will go over and do that observation. And that will be weighted 15% of the teacher's overall rating. required observations, and let me emphasize that this is a bare minimum. We do way above this. We just did not want to require too many that would put a strain on the system. Probationary teachers have 3 announced observations and 1 unannounced. Those formal observations have a whole system that's outlined in our guided teacher evaluation that we follow. And then tenure teachers have a minimum of 1 announced and 1 unannounced. But I can say from my own visit into teachers' classrooms, you can tell that both teachers and students are quite comfortable with administrators walking in. So I know that our administrators are in classrooms all the time, because it's just, I can come in and they just don't pay attention to me, which is good. That's a good thing. So that's the observation portion for teachers. Let me just highlight the principals, because principals also fall under 3012D as well and have the same requirements. Their observations are a little different, however. The lead evaluator, who will be the superintendent, will be weighted 90%, and there will also be an independent evaluator, which Bill will assign as another district office administrator, will be weighted 10%. And we'll do a total of 5 observations. This will be both for tenured or for probationary principals. I can say, though, between Jen and Bill and myself, we are in buildings multiple times in the week talking with principals. So that's not too much of
Jump in and ask a question. I understand what it means to have an unannounced visit into a classroom and observe the teaching.
Right.
How do you have an unannounced stopping in on the principal?
Good question.
Is this
An example would be a principal does principal's coffees, for example. Sometimes I'm scheduled to attend them, sometimes I'm not, so I may just drop down when Peggy's having a principal's coffee, not let her know I'm coming, but just show up for the principal's coffee. Or some other parent event, or some other meeting that she's running with faculty, say faculty meetings. I often go to the buildings on Wednesdays for faculty meetings and rotate between buildings.
But they would
and
be
visits.
something on the schedule beyond a one-on-one meeting with the teacher, for example.
Yeah.
Right? You wouldn't.
That would be unlikely.
Yeah.
You wouldn't just barge in on a meeting like that, no. These are difficult. I think they're difficult to make meaningful. They're not difficult to do. I stop into the buildings all the time and just go find the principal if they're free. But it's difficult to catch a principal doing the most difficult things that they do.
Right. Right.
One thing we know is you can't fake it in a classroom as a teacher or principal. You can't, the building's not run by, you can't say, oh, you know, Dr. Donohue's here, everybody do what you're supposed to do in a building. It's not gonna,
Everybody act natural.
you know, I know when I go in a classroom, I can walk in a classroom, if I suddenly can feel something's changing, you know that something's happening in the classroom and you pick up on that, but it doesn't happen frequently. And that's even harder in a school building than a classroom. So let me explain the student performance category. There are 2 main sections in this. A teacher gets a rating on the student performance category in 2 ways. One is from some teachers get a growth score from the state based on state tests. Right now that happens in grades 4 through 8 for teachers who teach ELA and math. So our 4 through 8 classroom teachers or middle school ELA and math teachers. Based on the kids' scores, the state determines through a very complicated and black box formula a score for the teachers. Those teachers who do not get a score from the state have what's called student learning objectives. It's to simulate what the state does, although in no way does it really simulate what the state does, but we attempt to. It has to show growth. You need pre-assessment data, and then you give a test at the end of the year and determine a target growth and how close you get to your target. If a teacher's course ends in a state test, like a Regents exam or 8th grade science, the teacher must use that exam. If it doesn't, we have to use some other state-approved assessment. Either we purchase a third party, or we can develop our own if we get the state to approve our assessments in advance. We did apply to be able to use local assessments, and the state did accept our application, so we do have that as an option. And I'll talk about that when I get to the last slide, that we may do that. We're evaluating that. We have some time to do so. So it allows us not to have to purchase a test or use state tests, or it's meaningless for teachers. So those are the 2 required sections in APPR and 3012D. We also have some things that are part of our local negotiations through our evaluation committee that works hard to find other ways to make meaningful opportunities for teacher growth. For probationary teachers, every probationary teacher does a portfolio project. That is a reflective opportunity for teachers at certain checkpoints throughout the year to reflect on their practice, and they have conversations with their administrator at the end of the year. Tenured teachers create a professional growth plan. Every teacher does this. And as I listen to the recognition we gave those teachers tonight, a lot of the work that they do comes out of their work on their professional growth plans, where they meet with their administrator and they think about how they can grow as a teacher. So every teacher completes that each year to think about their own, to reflect on the previous year's work and how they could grow as a teacher. And then finally, let me talk about the transition period. Because State Ed realized that they sort of messed up the first couple go-arounds on this, they created a 4-year transition period for APPR. So it was almost like a third plan we had to sort of juggle at the same time. It starts this year. So this year, we are not allowed to base a teacher's evaluation on the 3 through 8 math or ELA tests or the 9 through 12 growth score. That's the score that's developed for the principal. We have to omit those this year, and we cannot use those scores in the next 3 years. So we have to develop alternate SLOs for teachers and for principals. That could be based on other state tests. It could be based on Regents. We're allowed to use Regents exams. We're allowed to use the science assessments. Or we could use third-party assessments or develop our own local. So it won't be till after 2019 when we start implementing the real 3012D. We're in the transition process now, and that is why we decided to apply to the state to use local assessments. And during this transition period, we're going to evaluate whether we have the capacity to develop local assessments that are meaningful for teachers, or if we would rather just have our SLOs based on other state tests. And part of it is to see what the state ends up doing with this APPR system.
If you use a Regents exam, let's say take U.S. history, just as an example, what is the starting point that you're comparing it to? Because if they took the year before, it might have been European history. So that makes just no sense.
That's the problem. So we get pre-assessments. So the teachers will create a pre-assessment that's aligned to that assessment to assess their knowledge.
Okay, so they create the pre-assessment and then use the Regents as the post-assessment.
Exactly. That's what we've been doing there. And we're not statisticians, so what's the reliability of that? I'm not sure, but we have done our best to do that.
So given the confines of the system that we have to work with.
Right. So we have a little bit of time to evaluate what's working, see where the state goes in its direction, and make adjustments if there is ever something beyond 3012D. To anticipate there will be. And that's our system.
Can I ask a big picture question? When we agreed to have APPR rain down on us from Washington and Albany, we consented to it. You know, we didn't like it, and we thought that we already knew how to evaluate our teachers pretty well, and that there was an enormous amount of work that had to go into this, and we got little, if any, money to do that. It was just this huge unfunded mandate. How do you feel about it reflecting back? Have there been improvements in the way we have learned? You know, we've evolved in how we evaluate our teachers. Do you like the improvements, or were they worth it?
I'll say 2 things I think about that we were forced to think to consider that I think had a big influence. One was the use of a teacher practice rubric that gave specific criteria, allowed us to really look at the elements of effective teaching and do some training around that and communicate that to teachers clearly. That is something that there's language in that rubric that we still use now, and that has started to focus us on classroom teaching more than it had in the past. So I think that was one element of it. The other piece I would say is at first the system was overwhelmed by all the different pieces of it, that we started to involve more teachers in doing classroom visits. So the evaluation committee started doing observations to try to help out with all the observation requirements. As a result, teachers realized how exciting it was to visit other teachers' classrooms, and that's now growing into a whole peer observation system, which we're leaving out of the evaluative part of it and doing it just as professional development.
Well, that sounds like an unintended consequence.
That was an
of
unintended
this
consequence.
huge bureaucratic requirement.
Right. It was an unintended consequence, but our thinking about how to solve some problems and work around it. So it came out of the fact that we had to deal with a system that was overwhelmed. I don't know if we would have gotten there as quickly or in the same way had we not been forced to think creatively and outside the box.
Yeah, I have a
so I
hard
attribute
time-
that to the evaluation committee thinking, what can we do that's meaningful for us?
I have a hard time giving the state credit for that.
I'm not giving them credit. I'm giving us credit for actually thinking creatively. And we do have a committee of 14 folks who sit around and think about every detail of those words in that plan. It comes from this committee that does not take it lightly.
It would be wonderful if the state would do that too.
It would,
I mean, no, really, a science-based, research-based, valid system instead of politicians just saying this is what we want.
So when I say down here, the evaluation committee reviews feedback and revises the plan regularly, that's the power of our system, is every year we say, collect data from your colleagues, what's working, what's not working, what could be better, and we're just constantly tweaking that document to make it better. And it's this group of 14 folks that really come up with great things, and that's what makes it better.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Tim. A great report. Anybody else have any comments or questions?
What's APR?
I'm sorry?
No.
I'd just like to add, Tim, with the complex influx process, we really appreciate the flexibility and administration what you guys are doing to work around it. Thank you.
So now we have to vote on this, and then we're probably going to see this again soon enough, right?
Sure. Well, I'll note any changes based on this submission to the state.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table. All in favor? Okay. Did you vote? You did? Okay, sorry.
We just
You-
avoided state sanctions.
Yeah,
It's always good.
There you go.
made the deadline and everything. All right. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Tim.
Thank you.
And I want to acknowledge our social studies teacher, Sandra Epp, with our Longevity Service Award. 45 years.
Thank you for allowing me to come after torturing more of my students in college. I really appreciate it. It really has flown by.
Sandy, it's an amazing longevity record you created
Well,
here.
thank you.
Really, it's an amazing record.
Sandy, we're hoping you could come and just receive this as a token of our appreciation for 45 years of service in the district.
Thank you
And,
so much.
you know, for continuing to educate our students. And when you're not here, tonight she was at Manhattanville College teaching another course. And
New people, new teachers, that's exciting.
Yeah.
You know, that's what I was doing. But
People don't know perhaps that Dr. Rapp was a contestant on Jeopardy many years ago.
Okay.
And we're going to find that on YouTube. We're going to play it. But it was well known many years ago. That's one of the first things I heard about Dr. Rapp was that. You know she was a contestant on Jeopardy?
yeah, when I was on, they didn't have YouTube, but I actually have a DVD. Yes, the kids, before Christmas, they make me show.
Now, who was the host? Art Fleming around
Yes,
the
Art Fleming, and there was no technology.
That's right.
And the price, it was like $10.
At 10 to 50 and 60 to 100. That was like cardboard things. It was.
An excellent example of inflation, I understand
That's right.
economics.
Maybe we should ask if you could convert your winnings into 2016 dollars.
Oh, I'd love that.
Congratulations.
Congratulations,
Thank you so
Sandy.
much. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your
Thank you.
service.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure
appreciate
to
it.
see all of you.
See you another 45. All right.
Thank you for coming.
Drive home safely, Sandy.
Okay. Can I have a nominee, can I have, let me see, how am I going to say this? Hold on one second, let me get my thoughts straight here. Brad, I'm going to turn this over to you in a
What do we
minute,
do,
but we need
10.4?
a 10.4, let's see. Can I have a motion to not, got it. Can
Motion
I
to
have a motion to?
authorize the president or the superintendent to nominate on behalf of the board Peggy Zugaby as the Area 10 Director of the Board of Directors of the New York State School Boards Association.
Okay, can I have a second? Second. You want to talk to us about that?
Sure.
Thank you.
Peggy is been serving as the Area 10 Director and sits on the board of NYSBA for a number of years. They're 2-year terms. 2 years ago, we were, and she needs to collect, I think, to continue in this service, nominations from, I think, 10 districts in the area. And 2 years ago, we were one of the districts that nominated her, and I think she's been exceptional in her service, and would like to see her continue in that. So I would like Byram Hills to nominate her again for another 2-year term.
Anybody have any questions for Brad about that? So, in your opinion, it's a good thing to do, and we should do
Yeah,
it?
she's very effective, and she is always accessible. She comes to all the West Putt meetings as well, which is why I have such a track record with her.
Well, your recommendation to me carries the day. You're the one who knows this better than anyone.
Yeah, but if we want to get a message to NYSBA, that is certainly one very effective avenue.
Good.
All right, thank you so much for that. All right, all in favor? Okay. All right, thank you so much. So now the nomination comes from you, is that right?
I think I have the forms, yeah.
Okay.
I think you've effectively nominated her, I just filled in the forms.
Right, you can sign it.
You can sign it
Send
for
it in.
us? All
Yeah.
right, all right. Thank you, Brad. Okay, that brings us to item 10.5, which is the Veterans Tax Exemption discussion. This is not a public hearing. I just want to remind the board that we had a request from the Aramonk American Legion to consider the Veterans Tax Exemption. And a couple meetings ago, we had asked the district office to come back to us with background information so that we could understand the impact of this request and what we were being asked. And so tonight, we are going to review that information. And so we have a chance to ask Greg and Bill questions about that. So I'm going to turn it over to you. Okay?
Sure. Just to give the background on this, I guess about a year and a half ago, the governor authorized school districts to effectively give a tax discount to certain classes of veterans if the school district so voted. Brings up a number of philosophical and general questions which we aren't going to discuss tonight, but just to walk through them a little bit. One is the whole question of exactly what is the role of boards of education. Certainly we're comfortable making educational policy and even budget policy that ultimately affects taxpayers, but I think the question of how we become tax policy deciders is a challenging question. I should point out that the governor did not fund the bill, which is what creates the issue, because if school districts grant this discount, the amount is picked up by the veterans' neighbors. It's not, it doesn't just go away. There's also the question of merit. There are a number of categories of individuals who are not veterans to whom school districts can also give discounts on taxes. So in considering this group, should we consider other groups is probably a question to be thought about. There's also the question of fairness, since the veterans' neighbors will be paying it. And there's the question of politics. The School Boards Association has taken the firm opinion that if the governor passed this, he should have funded it. Bills have been drafted and passed. I think there's a question about whether the governor will sign it or not. However, Brett pointed out tonight that both houses in the state Capitol have passed bills that would allow the state to fund this rather than other taxpayers. And then finally, there's the question of, is the amount of money even significant enough to spend a good deal of time on? We're not going to spend time on any of those tonight, but they are some of the complexities of this issue. The board asked us to collect data, which Greg Carlson has done, and he'll present that now so that we have an idea of exactly what we're talking about.
Can I just clarify that? I'm aware that the houses have passed a bill that would expand the categories of eligible veterans, not that the state would fund it. I'm not aware of anybody thinking that that's...
That's my understanding as well.
I think I walked in on the end of that
But you're right in
conversation.
terms of the lobbying. I mean, the lobbying from the State School Board Association has been intense on that front.
Asking the state.
And there
to
have
fund
been
it.
some legislators, a few in Rockland County took the lead on it, trying to push it, but I think it's gotten very little traction.
I see.
But Cold War veterans are now added to the potential list of categories of veterans that would qualify under this if we passed it.
So I'm going to walk through the mechanics of, and not the merits of this law. As Bill said, it's been around for a short while now, and it's truly an option of the board. They're not required to either take action or to approve it. So there are options with it. It does change. I talked to Jeff Kale about it just to get some insight, and he described it as a riddle wrapped in an enigma.
Yeah.
So it's very complicated. The legal profession tends to stray away from this because it is politically charged and it's very complicated too. So I'm going to give an overview, and the key word here is I'm giving general information. It is truly a complicated piece of legislation. So as I said before, the school districts may offer this exemption. It's a local option, and it is administered by the local assessor for each of our towns. So there's a series of forms to be filled out and supporting documentation that comes from the Veterans Administration and other parties that's submitted with an application to the town assessor, who has complete authority and control over the program. The only deadline there is that for an application to be considered for a partial tax exemption, it has to be on file with the assessor's office by March 1st.
So the application goes in by March 1st, is the deadline for the following tax year?
Correct.
That's for application by a taxpayer?
By a veteran.
Yeah.
By a veteran. So March 1st for this region. It's different for other parts of the state, but we don't worry about that. But for us, it's March 1st for our 4 towns. Qualifications. The veteran has to have an honorable discharge. They have to have served during a time of war, and the dates and the conflicts are there: Persian Gulf conflict, Vietnam War, Korean War, World War II. There are other exceptions that I've seen in some writings, not all. I've seen World War I, which I don't think there's very many World War I veterans around. The Spanish-American War. Also, if an individual has received an expeditionary medal, they do not have to serve during wartime in any of the services listed: Armed Forces, Navy, Marine Corps, or Global War on Terrorism are also eligible. It could also have been in World War II on the U.S. Merchant Marines. You can see where this gets a little complicated as you keep going. It could be a civilian serving in the American Field Service under control of the U.S. Armies. You also could be a flight crew or aviation ground support employee of Pan Am if you're working under contract with the Air Transport Command. Additional potential exceptions: you could actually own the property through a co-op with a veteran as a tenant stockholder would be eligible. And there's also another wrinkle, which are Gold Star parents. These are parents of a child who died in the line of duty, and that has definitions surrounding that as well.
Are these criteria the same as what the town has to follow for the
Yes.
town's rebate?
Yeah, these are all the same. In terms of property that's eligible, you have to have legal title to the residential property. It has to be your primary residence, much like how the STAR program works. It could be the veteran, spouse, or both as owners, or unremarried surviving spouse. And there's a couple other exceptions to that, which if you're a child, etc., and have lived in the house, and different ownership rights under that, but I didn't put that down because it's too complicated. Exemption amounts. There's something called New York State Basic Maximums. If you serve during wartime and are eligible, you'd receive up to 15% of your assessed value to a maximum of $12,000. If you served in a combat zone, you get an additional 10% on top of that, and another $8,000 maximum. And if you became disabled for service-connected disability, your disability rating is multiplied by 0.5 or divided in half and added onto the wartime combat zone and up to another 40,000.
I know this is Ira's favorite topic. We're going to do the, what is it, the multiplier thing?
Equalization.
Yeah, the equalization rate. 15% of the assessed value.
Assessed value.
Which is some fictional number based on a lot of information that most people in the public don't know. But it's not 15% of market value.
No.
But you say, or max of $12,000. Is that 12,000 in assessed value or 12,000 in market value?
Market value for that one.
So 15% of your assessed value after all of the equalization rates to a maximum of $12,000 of market value benefit. All right, I understand. Thanks.
Here's where we come in. School district procedures. In order to adopt this resolution, the district is required to have a public hearing. Only after the public hearing, it has to be advertised in legal paper for 5 days, same as any public hearing. And then at that point, the board may adopt a resolution providing this exemption. If it were to want to change the exemption, and that's either increase or decrease, there's a second public hearing that'd be required and another resolution to make the change to the rates. Also, if the board wanted to go further and enact the co-op.
I don't think you have to get into this much detail.
Okay. For Gold Star, it has to be a simple majority, no public hearing. Financial implications, as Bill mentioned, it really is a redistribution of taxes among taxpayers. It's a tax shift. It doesn't reduce any monies the school receives. It's who we receive the money from. With this exemption, if it's in place, it may reduce the STAR payments. So I haven't calculated that because that's really beyond what I think anyone can do right now. But it could reduce the amount of STAR reimbursement, which theoretically would increase the taxes slightly. There's no income circuit breakers. There's no limit on the amount of money a person can earn and still be eligible. And as Bill said, state reimbursement is 0 at this point. Get into the actual numbers for North Castle. It's the only one I did, Ira. Just North Castle. So North Castle represents 85% of our property wealth for our school district. In this case, I showed three different options at the basic, which the board would have to adopt first. What does it mean? There's 113 people that live in town right now that would be eligible for this in North Castle, and it amounts to a tax shift of $20,000 approximately. If we went to the next level up, few levels up for the basic law, it could go up to $62,000, and then if we went to the high appreciation, which is where we are for Westchester County, it could be as high as $94,000 shifted for that. And we're considering a high appreciation municipality.
Greg, if you don't mind me asking, the eligibility criteria seemed somewhat complicated in the prior slides. How did we determine the eligibility? I mean, is that?
I got it from our assessor. They already know because
okay.
this has been adopted by the town and the county, so they already have a list of names and amounts. That's where these numbers came from.
Okay.
For combat, there's 41 members of the community that are eligible for this. Once again, it's the non-combat plus the combat. These are the amounts. This is the amount of tax that would be shifted, $12,000 to up to $57,000 to get kind of an idea of what the costs would be.
Hey Greg, just go through once again the 3 different levels to make sure we understand. I mean, I guess so the state's saying.
Well, it really comes off a chart, and I know this is hard to see, but every district in the state that adopts this has to start here with the basic maximum. They can go up or down from that. So it's almost like looking at 1040. There's all different places you can end up on this. This is where, the reason this one is here, this is what the town of North Castle has adopted and the county of Westchester. So this would be consistent with what they have done. In this case, like I said, it'd be approximately $57,000 of tax shift for that, for the combat veterans.
What does high appreciation mean?
There's-
How is the word appreciation being used?
I put the definition back here. So if you look on your computer, you'll see that that's what the definition is. Sales price differential factors that they use for STAR. So if there's a differential for STAR because the housing prices are much higher than the rest of the state, there's a few counties that this applies to, like Nassau, New
So
York
it's
City.
expensive real estate.
Yes.
Okay.
And then the third is just, this one I didn't put any detail with because it varies based on the disability level. There are 7 disabled combat veterans that live in North Castle. Their shift, because they get different percentages, 50% of their disability rating, plus the non-combat and combat added together. The highest amount of money that would shift would be about $13,000. Putting this together, stripping away all that detail, these are the different rates, 12, 8,000. These are additive, 12,000 plus the 840. It translates to 37,800 for the basic minimum. Looking at the higher basic minimum, 110,000, and then the high appreciation of 54, 36, and 180,000. It would be $164,000 of tax shift.
In total.
Of total tax shift.
Total all in. Trying to take this is the last screen, trying to take a look at what this would mean for anybody that's very curious. This is our tax levy that was adopted, the $77.7 million. Here are the amounts. So if it was just the basic minimum, it would be 0.5% change in taxes, up to 0.21% change in taxes. So a house worth full value, market value of $500,000, they pay approximately $7,700 in taxes. It would be an increase of $4 up to $16, depending on the level, A, B, or C. $1.5 million house, the highest, just as options to show this, they would pay $23,000 in tax. Their taxes would increase by either $11, $33, or $49. Now these are estimates because these numbers move. Equalization rates change. Number of veterans here change. The laws are changing as we're sitting here tonight. So there's a shifting of what the rules are as we're talking about it, and it's expanding. It's not contracting. This doesn't include Cold War, and there's another whole category called eligible funds. And there's a lot of talk about eligible funds. Veterans would also be eligible for this as well as the eligible funds, which they get a deduct, an exemption for that as well. But that's another story.
Now, is it correct that this does not have any linkage at all to the tax cap calculation? Because this
Correct.
is just it's just redistribution of the tax base.
Yes.
It's not. But what about the STAR rebate? Does it somehow impact the ability for people to get STAR? Because I read
It reduced STAR rebate because the property values at the first cut, they all go down. Those properties are now worth less, so there's less rebate available for those. We receive the STAR rebate. The district receives the STAR rebate. So that money has to be made up somewhere. It'd be very minor, but it would be a change in the taxes collected, because this shift would shift the taxes. District still gets every dollar that is in this number here. It's just where it comes from. District will receive $77.7 million. Just who pays it changes.
And in simple terms, somebody who is disabled gets the maximum benefit. And let's say we're talking about 2 taxpayers, each of whom own a $1.5 million house, both the disabled person and the taxpayer. disabled person is going to benefit by how much, and the individual taxpayer is going to have their taxes increased by how much? Is that a fair question?
Yeah, I can't give you an answer right now,
You
though.
know, the percentage breakdown of the math.
Yeah, and part of it is this moving target idea. I could try to come up with some more
Well, I mean,
calculations.
you're saying roughly $50 would be shifted to somebody who
Yeah,
owned a
you
one
can look at
point-
this. You can look at this piece here. It's 0.2%, 0.2%. It's
I also don't think, I mean, we can't get into every possible combination by individual, and we don't even know if those individuals exist. So we might know that we have one disabled, but we don't know if they're in $1 million house or a $500,000 house.
Right.
But we do know enough to know that these numbers are not going to be exact, especially obviously if there are changes to the law, but they're directionally correct given
It
that
gives
these
you,
towns already
gives you a
doing this, right?
magnitude, gives you an idea. Of
Or like with all the other districts that adopted this, is it like they think that there was a $50 shift and it ended up being a $500 shift?
Yeah, I saw some of them as high as like 0.4, maybe double this. So instead of $49, would have been $100. I mean, against a tax bill of $23,000, I'm not sure, what anyone would consider significant.
So let me just throw a suggestion out here, but I'm open to other input. We got some of this information late this afternoon because of our lawyers. So for some of us, we might not have had time to fully study this. I would make a suggestion that we table the discussion. We think about, what you've given us and really read through it, and
I think it's a
possibly at the
decision. I think it's a
next
decision
meeting.
for the next board.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
Makes sense.
Mia and Laura have to be involved
Yeah.
in this.
Makes sense.
So at that point, we can, figure out some more questions that we have, and is everyone all right doing
I'll move
that?
to table 10.5 to the next regular business meeting of the board.
Is everyone all right with that?
Someone needs to second it.
Second.
And we need to vote on it.
Everybody, all in favor?
You're dragging us to the finish line.
I know. I got that. Thank you very much for giving it to us. It's a lot to think about. Yeah. All right. Okay.